Is death bad for you? Not according to these ancient philosophers. Most of us think that our own death would be bad. It's often something we fear or even dread. But according to the ancient philosophers Epicurus and Lucretius, death isn't bad at all. In fact, they argue that it's irrational for us to fear death. Epicurus writes, "Accustom yourself to the belief that death is nothing to us, for all good and evil lie in sensation, whereas death is the absence of sensation. Therefore, that most frightful of evils, death, is nothing to us, seeing that when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we do not exist." We can rephrase his argument as follows. Something is bad for you only if it is bad for you while you exist. Your death isn't bad for you while you're alive, and your death isn't bad for you while you're dead. Therefore, your death isn't bad for you. Premises 2 and 3 might sound strange at first, but think of it this way. If you're alive, your death hasn't happened yet, and something that hasn't happened yet can't be bad for you. And once you're dead, you no longer exist. So how could anything be bad for you when you don't exist? This means that whether you're dead or alive, there is no time at which your death is bad for you. Now, before responding to the argument, we need to make a few clarifications. First, this argument assumes there is no afterlife, and that death is the end of your existence. Second, this argument is only meant to show that your death is not bad for you, but your death can still be bad for other people, namely those who survive you. They can still mourn and experience the pain of your passing. So this argument is not meant to show that death is never a bad thing. It's only meant to show that your death is not bad for you. Third, this argument is about death, but it's not about dying. The process of dying can still be very bad for you. The process of dying can involve physical or emotional pain, and those are things that you can experience. However, your death, the moment at which you cease to be alive, that is not something you can experience. So although dying might be bad for you, according to this argument, death is not. You might be tempted to respond that you still fear death, and that fear is something you experience while you're alive. So can't we say that death is bad for you, insofar as it causes you to fear? According to Epicurus and Lucretius, this response fails to appreciate the argument. You fear death only because you think it is bad for you. But once you understand that death can never be bad for you, you should realize that it is irrational to fear it. In fact, they offer this argument as a way to help you live a happier life. They say that the irrational fear of death is something that prevents you from being happy. So once you realize that death isn't bad for you, you can then live a happier life without that fear. Not everyone is convinced by this argument. Recall that premise 1 says, something is bad for you only if it is bad for you while you exist. The philosopher Thomas Nagel argues that things can be bad for us even if we're not around to experience them. For example, suppose your grandfather left you a will after he passed. It seems like ignoring his will could still be bad for him even though he's not around to experience it. Furthermore, even though you will not exist to experience death, it still seems bad because of what it deprives you of. We typically regard it as more tragic when someone dies in their 20s than when they die in their 90s. And one way to explain this difference is that the 20-year-old was deprived of more life than the 90-year-old. If this is right, then perhaps your death can be bad for you, even if you're not around to see it. To recap, Epicurus and Lucretius argue that your death won't be bad for you, because nothing can be bad for you when you don't exist. But others respond that death deprives you of future experiences, And that is something that's bad for you, whether or not you exist to experience it.